Well, we're 2 days into our third lockdown, a national lockdown. I'm not buying this tier 5 nonsense. I know people online are saying about tier 5, but that's the internet for you. And indeed, I'm increasingly of this opinion, probably the only person that thinks that this country has not only lost its way, but some kind of sense of itself. It's incomparable on one hand about Blitz spirit of 1940-41 to now, but some people in this country and some people overseas who aren't British believe we have this spirit of all coming together at a time when the odds are against the country. Like the war, everyone in the world really, with certain exceptions that weren't in the Second World War, are enduring the same thing and having to put up with the same thing, and each country is perhaps learning something about itself as we are. Reading, as I have done lately, books like Leonard Mosley's Backs to the Wall, which is largely about London during the war, Philip Siegler's London at War book, M.J. Gaskin's Blitz, the story of 29 December 1940, many others that I have read, like The Longest Night by Gavin Mortimer, which is about the last night of the Blitz, 10th, 11th of May 1941, almost 80 years ago now. Whatever you read, or whatever you look at, depending on the author, because you have your right-leaning authors and your left-leaning authors, and your authors that are doing a story with a certain intent, perhaps. Something links all, a sense of community, perhaps, a sense of unity. Britain of 1940-41 is vastly different to the world of 2020-21 now. Technology, how we get around the world, how we communicate, have all combined and changed the world we know about, the world we live in. And in 1940-41, it was a military and political situation. A madman in Berlin had managed to conquer almost all Europe, and only Britain physically stood alone against the might of the Third Reich. And people came from all over to Britain to help out, to do their bit. The free Poles, Czechs, Dutch, Belgians, French, Slovaks, Norwegians, Danish, and those from the Empire, the Dominions, and those from the free world like the United States. And the Empire, they were free in some ways. And the Blitz is Britain in microcosm. The Blitz came 20 years after the world's last pandemic before this one. Were there exceptions to this image, to this myth? More than likely, and they were. People, for instance, did not like ARP wardens, considering them little Hitlers and know-it-alls and do-it-alls. Some ARP wardens were on a power trip, like telling people to turn that light off and shut that door or whatever. Some were actually quite nice and innocent. And then you had conscientious objectors, known as conchies, who, on a matter of principle, said they would not fight for king and country, and joined the fire service or the ARP and were shunned in some cases. A conchie in those days was next to being a traitor. There were people who complained about their neighbours doing things they shouldn't do, but perhaps having outrageous parties and gatherings and going out willy-nilly, not wearing their gas masks. And that was an anal thing for a lot of people. Even soldiers that were being condemned to death at the Old Bailey when they turned to leave the dock were sternly pointed at by the police officer looking after them, and told more or less with that look, pick up your gas masks. You never know, I suppose. People strained and chafed even against what they were being told by the government. But perhaps the purpose has changed, of course, and indeed technology, as I say. 1918 to 21. Lord knows how my great-grandparents got through it, and everyone else in the country and around the world, because it killed a lot more people than Corona's ever going to. Not because Corona is a hoax, I should hasten to add, for anyone wanting to cling on to it, but it was a more serious illness. Killed millions of people all over the world. But they got through it. And we got through the Blitz and the war, even when the doodle bugs and rockets were coming from 1944. And in some cases a lot worse than the Blitz itself, because with a V2 you could not plan for its arrival. It was launched in occupied Europe, or Germany itself, and a few minutes later, after travelling at around 6,000 miles an hour, it just drove into the ground, killing thousands. Had they been used properly, then the British spirit that had held out 4 years previous might finally have crumbled. Perhaps if they had been directed against the invasion ports in Britain and not London, then Hitler might have scuppered D-Day and the history would have changed. But come 1945, everyone poles into London, if they are in London anyway, and elsewhere across the country, to celebrate for E-Day. And on that day, 8th of May 1945, the government abolished an act brought in 5 years previously that it was a punishable act to spread despondency and sedition and gloom. The lockdown will end. Another lockdown might happen. The way things are going, you never know, I suppose. Corona will come back. And what makes it different nowadays, I think, generally speaking, is the internet. The internet is able to carry all these rumours and conspiracy theories and opinions and everything, and can arrange protests off of it, like what's going to happen again next Monday probably. And nowadays I suppose we've got the modern day equivalent of an ARP warden, the COVID marshals, albeit they're a little bit different of course. They're not looking out for lights being on, people being out perhaps when they shouldn't be. It'll be interesting personally to see Thames Valley Police's reaction to the protests in town next Monday, because Monday just gone, they stood amongst the crowd watching the protester, who was making some rather smug remarks about, oh look, here they are, fine me if you want to, I will not pay the fine. And then the coppers just walked away and drove off. And saying they were being compared to Gestapo policing, the Gestapo would be quite horrified to see police forces do that, I'd imagine. True democracy is when you are allowed to talk about what you want and say what you want and report what you want. Granted, the police will probably be heavy-handed in places, but not in this town certainly at the moment. Otherwise that protest would have been shut down and the people dispersed and fined. That has yet to happen. Tyranny is when you are not allowed to talk about things and protest as you wish, as you see in Russia and China and Hong Kong and other countries around the world. North Korea, you very rarely hear what happens in that country. If this is a true tyranny, we have yet to see the full force of it. If Boris Johnson truly was a tyrannical leader, and I don't think he's got it in him personally, considering his government so far, then I would simply skip Parliament and go straight to the streets. But whatever we think of him and his government, and people do, that's the facts at the moment. Churchill went to Manchester during the Blitz in 1940, because the Blitz was more than just London, and saw a crowd of people amidst the ruins of their homes, and shouted with full emotion, "Are we downhearted?" And they shouted back immediately, "No." He visited the homes of the East Enders in September 1940 and subsequent visits, and expected a tongue lashing for effectively allowing this to happen. Some people were obviously not fans of him, and they weren't fans of the Royal family even after the Royal family turned up, cynics that they are. And I said that, perhaps rightly, the royal family only turned up because they had been bombed and it was a PR stunt. Well, they turned up and they felt the sorrow. And the EastEnders said to Churchill, give it them back. Well, we can't give anything back to anyone, I suppose, now. Our enemy is invisible. But we will get through it. Is it Blitz spirit? Maybe. The British people, throughout their history, have tried to stand up against tyranny. The Romans were driven out of Britain to almost 1600 odd years ago. The Britons were effectively the only people to have done that. The Germans did their bit. But being an island nation, it was a fairly dramatic exit, historically anyway. And now here we are bitching and complaining about having to wear a face mask, about not being able to go out and whatnot. Well, perhaps I'm more fortunate than others that I live by myself and I have to do everything by myself. But I didn't get to see my granddad in his last 4 months on this planet. And I didn't get to see a man who was like a father to me for the last month on this planet. And I didn't get to spend Christmas with all my family. And I haven't been able to see my family or friends for the better part of a year. We make sacrifices, and there will be worse to come. Not Corona, but something else. And that's what I think, anyway. Subscribe, dislike, like, do whatever you want. I have 10 subscribers, so that'll give you an idea of my audience reach. Anyway, thank you for listening.